thank you so much for joining Spilling the Teeth. I'm really excited for this episode. We worked together quite a long time and doing various bits and pieces. But, for listeners that aren't like me and don't know the ins and outs of yourself and Mind Ninja, how did it come about? What's your history? And how did your background in dentistry, neuroscience, positive psychology all come together to make what is the amazing Mind Ninja?
Yeah, great question. I think anyone working in the wellness industry has a personal connection, and I'm just the same. So, 3 years after graduating from dental school, I experienced both burnout and depression, and that was my first mental health challenges. I hadn't had any prior to this. And so that led me to seeking therapy, and I discovered all these amazing, rich, valuable, practical psychological tools from mindfulness to self-compassion. And that really led me to look into the research and do a deep dive. And I discovered that actually there's a vast amount of research amongst medics and dental professionals in healthcare around how psychological interventions can not only kind of prevent burnout, but equally as important, increase positive wellbeing markers. And that essentially led me to pivot into psychology. And I founded the Mind Ninja in 2019. And then I really thought about, how can I bring this to the profession in terms of workshops and webinars and even creating customized products. And so the mission really has been, how do we bring back humanizing dentistry, but bring back the happiness and those positive markers that make, dentistry so rich.
Yeah, it's amazing. And thank you for sharing your experience. I think that's one thing that's happened to quite a lot of dentists, but not just the dentists, like lots of dental professionals, people in the industry. People often say it's a very lonely profession, but it doesn't have to be. And speaking about that experience so openly about your own burnout and how that shaped the Mind Ninja, how did that specifically shape the support that you bring to dental practitioners and their teams?
In our undergrad training, we're not taught how to support ourselves. Beyond that, as a postgrad, we might have practices. We're not taught how to be a leader, how to, help your team flourish, and that even that business side and that connection to profitability and productivity. So we're not taught those aspects, but they're so fundamental to clinical life. And so like I said, it became increasingly obvious. Let me think of ways I can drive something. It was just like this is ridiculous. We need to do something. And there was this incredible urgency. And you know what actually probably did, reflecting on it, help was I'd gone through a divorce. And so part of that was, reviewing my life and thinking, okay, I'm kind of dream walking in dentistry. And it really got me to review that, I guess. And so that probably made a big difference as well.
Yeah, and I think those big pivotal moments in life, they do end up defining us, and they do define our mental state. And very often we forget about the little things that we need to do to just keep ourselves ticking and keep ourselves happy. And that kind of relates to what you do with the Mind Ninja. Like you say that mental fitness should be treated like brushing or flossing, the same way that we tell our patients to do those basic things. Like we should be doing basic things with our mental health. These are small daily habits. They prevent much bigger problems, right? So what would be that one thing you wish everyone would start with today?
I think a really simple one of checking in and starting off with self-awareness, asking ourselves, what's going on? How's my mind doing? How's my body feeling? We can do this, obviously when we wake up or, in between seeing our patients, even having those check-in moments so that we can then support ourselves better. If we don't have that self-awareness side of things, then, obviously we can't not only prevent things like burnout, but we can't perform well. Now, there's different ways you can check in. It might be you take a deep breath and, take a mindful moment and ask those questions. Or it might be that you check in by writing and journaling. Or it could be that you check in by going for a walk and connecting to nature. And that's how you do this, or you go to the gym, whatever it might be. But having those regular check-ins daily are going to be really pivotal.
Yeah, totally. I think you should definitely check in with yourself, but as well, when you're someone like a practice owner or you're a group owner, maybe you need to check in with your teams as well. It's down to us as leaders in that space to be able to check in with those teams and make sure that they're all doing all right. And I mean, you yourself, you've worked with people across all of healthcare, universities, big brands. You've worked with Henry Schein One, for instance. But I suppose, what's the pattern that you see in this industry? What's something you go, if I see that, I can tell that someone's close to burnout or a team is close to burnout?
Well, the telltale signs are, mental exhaustion, and a lack of empathy is a big one. So feeling quite disengaged with, the people you're working with. It could be in a dental context, it's your patients. So getting frustrated by your patients coming in with problems. I mean, that's what we do as a dentist. We fix problems. But with burnout, you have that empathy loss. Like normal stresses feel so much heavier, and then of course cynical thoughts around the workplace. In a team context, we're talking about probably absenteeism and presenteeism. So like people coming, either taking time off or coming in, and just you can tell that they're not in a good place. They might look like they're not in a good place. They might tell you, they might be acting different. So they might be withdrawn, or lashing out, having a short fuse. All of those are kind of telltale signs.
Yeah, it's really interesting, and a lot of that stuff actually comes from the way the industry is. Like it's full of high achievers, it's full of perfectionists, and you're kind of taught that at university, right? Like how to be perfect in your field. But I suppose what we need is a mindset shift here. Like you don't have to be perfect, but you have to look after your patients. But what's a kind of mindset shift that you would want to put onto people? Like what's the mindset set shift to make people keep their standards high, sure, but protecting their own well-being at the same time?
I think the biggest thing for me, like delving into the research, and just exploring perfectionism, because as you rightly say, it's a really big factor in high achievers. We've got higher rates of perfectionism, and actually that is linked to higher rates of burnout and depression, anxiety. So there is this kind of correlation there. And the biggest mindset shift that I find particularly useful is that perfection just doesn't exist. It's not something that we can strive for. We want to do what's best for our patients and do the best care that we can, but we can't be perfect. We want to do what's best, and we want to reach a good standard. But beating ourselves up when things don't go well, when there are failures, is not a long-term sustainable plan, not only for mental health, but also for performance. We know from the data that actually if we are more self-compassionate and show ourselves kindness like we would, a friend or loved one, we're actually more likely to pick ourselves up from failures, more likely to persist. And so we need kind of that attitude. In dentistry, failure rates are high. That's part of the game. We create something, we know it's going to fail at some point. We are, like we were saying, high achievers. So once we start recognizing our inner language, we can start thinking, oh, okay, what words can we use that our coach or mentor or loved one might use? How can we use that for ourselves rather than beating ourselves up?
Yeah, absolutely. And a lot of these can come down to like just drainage. Like you at the end of a clinical day, like the dentist can feel absolutely drained, and that energy feels like it's going really fast. So to get you back on that right mindset track and sort of keeping your mindset shift in focus, what are some simple mental reset techniques?
Yeah, that's a great question. Energy management is a consistently important topic that I've recognized whenever I do workshops. This is something that comes up, that there's this lack of energy, or being consistently in survival mode. And so what I would say, like really simple resets, include the practice of mindfulness. And not often when we think of mindfulness, we think of it in the context of meditation. And so what I would really emphasize is that mindfulness is so much more than meditation. So really simple stuff that you can do in the workplace. As a clinician, we're talking about taking, deep breaths. So making that exhale, the out breath, longer than in breath, triggers the parasympathetic nervous system and invites a host of positive emotions. So that's the science behind it. When do we do this? We do this multiple times in the day. We can, whilst we're delivering local anesthetic, take deep breaths. Whilst we're donning PPE on and off. Whilst we're waiting for alginate to set. Like there's moments where we can take a breath. We've got a visor on, we've got a mask on. No one needs to know. But what we're doing is we're getting ahead of the stressors, but not just that. We're increasing presence, we're increasing performance, we're getting energy back, we're restoring ourselves, rather than leaving our stress management and care and energy management to the end of the day. But, something as simple as, I'm going to take a few breathers and I'm going to be consistent with it rather than wait until I've got cortisol coursing through my body at that point. So I think the practice of mindfulness, and it can even be kind of grounding yourself. So this is a great mindfulness practice where you take a breath and you notice, for example, the sensation of your feet against the ground. And that's what we mean by grounding ourselves. We might also hone into our five senses. What can we see, smell, hear? And that is you exercising the mindfulness muscle. You being present has been shown in the neuroscience research to be really good for our brains. It's a happier state when we are constantly kind of ruminating about the past, or we're time traveling to the future. That can be quite an anxious state. The present state and actually focusing on the patient, on the now, is actually really good for our brain. And then there's other kind of moments. Could you go out for a nature walk? Even on a work day, we know from the research around nature, for example, how looking at green spaces, being in green spaces is really restorative when it comes to energy. And there's even a recommendation of 120 minutes of being outdoors in nature, preferably forest or woods, a week. We've got other kind of resets. I think a really nice one is, and a simple one is gratitude as well, and the practice of gratitude. Our brain has this natural negativity bias, and it really focuses on all that's not going well. How can we hone into, the flip of that, the abundance that we have, the positivity, the things are going well? How can we train our brain to look for this? And also, how can we train our team to look for this and create this positive culture? So that can simply be through the practice of gratitude. You might want to journal and write down 3 things you're grateful for and why. You could practice or you could play gratitude ping pong. So this is what I love to do with teams, where in a team meeting, you go back and fro sharing good things that have happened, small little wins. They don't have to be the big ones, and often the smaller ones are so important, those details. And so honing into those wins, even hearing other people's wins, increases positive emotions. And so there's a lot of potential upside of this. And so, is there a way that we can embed gratitude and just humanizing our teams more, and giving them energy through that can be quite powerful.
Yeah, that's amazing, especially that ping pong idea. Small moments that make a big difference. But as part of those moments, that's when you can really hone in on your team and sort of see where they might be struggling, and you might find that there's some cracks along the way that you need to sort of help fill with kindness and love. Um, what are some of those micro moments that you might see in that group setting, and what can you do about them, I guess?
So, I mean, you've got a couple of things. You've got things that would cause a lot of alarm. So if you're a practice owner and you notice, like I was saying, those crisis point telltales, those signs and symptoms, where you've got, huge turnover, you could be getting staff that keep taking time off, and perhaps the staff members aren't doing very well. And that's where mental health first aid actually is so, so helpful. And knowing the language as to how to help someone and support your team. And so there is training around that, but essentially it's about kind of recognizing some of those signs and symptoms and approaching that individual and providing a listening ear rather than someone to come up with solutions. And then once that person is comfortable, then you may want to signpost for the crisis point services that we know are dedicated for dental professionals. So we've got that aspect. The other aspect, of course, is if your team members aren't kind of flourishing. So it's not just like they might have a mental illness, but they also might not be kind of doing well in terms of performing as well as they could be. And so it's worth kind of recognizing some of those signs as well. It might be just that you notice that there might be more complaints, or they're not as enthused as they normally are. They might be a bit deflated, and it's kind of coming back to this languishing state. which is really a common psychological state. I think that actually training in this area can make a big difference. And so having, mental health first aid, but not just that, like positive practices for the team can make a big difference. Positive psychology, mindfulness, all of these like training aspects can really help the team kind of flourish.
Yeah, I totally agree. Getting people in, like yourself, to sort of get those mental health first aiders, they're not just for big companies, right? This is not like, you don't have to be a 500-person company to have mental health first aider. Like, you could be 5 people, you could be 3 people. It could just be yourself and you're your own mental health first aider. I think as this is a quick sips episode, like I want to give people something to take away. If we could get practices to just change one thing this month, what's that one thing that you think that they should look to change this month?
Just getting back to basics and humanizing, your team and your communication with your team. So it sounds super basic, but I'm really talking about speaking to your team members in a kinder, loving way, in a thoughtful way, in a mindfully listening, empathy, showing a sense of empathy and care to your team members. We know from the data that actually our managers make a big difference. 70% of variance of our manager connection with the team really impacts the well-being of the team and the happiness of the team. So that communication side, can you mindfully listen? Can you show up with empathy and create that aspect of positive culture? We tend to forget that because mental fitness becomes an individual issue. And of course, there's the individual side. But when we're talking about the team, the culture side makes a big impact. And in fact, actually, when we look at the research as well, and also if you just like speak anecdotally to others, you know that if you've got a horrible manager that's talking to you in a nasty way, or in a reckless way, in like lack of understanding, it does make a big difference to your happiness at work, right?
Mm,
And so getting back to that is going to be a game changer because it creates staff that are enjoying work, are loyal, that want to be around each other because whatever problems there might be, they know that their leaders, the managers, the principals are going to, support them. They've created this psychological safety and that they can go to them when there are problems and they're not going to be reprimanded or there's going to be support for them, and they can really perform at their best at that point because of that safety. And so, yeah, getting back to the simple aspects.
yeah, absolutely. It's small habits to make big changes. What's the number one habit? Not just action, but the habit, the thing that you should be doing every day, as easy as you do brush your teeth. What's the one thing you think people should start doing today?
We haven't even talked about strengths, but that can make our life really rich. And so we know from the data that strengths help really increase like productivity and happiness and well-being. Sounds really bizarre that it can do that. It can even reduce depressive symptoms. But if you feel like you are like sleepwalking through life and it's just not, it's quite grey, is there a way that you can add colour? You can through delving into your strengths and using your specific strengths in a daily kind of context. So, with your patients, but also outside, creating things that you can do using your strengths more. And just to make this like super obvious, strengths is what we mean by strengths are positive parts of us, like things that we inherently have that energize us. And we talked about like lack of energy, right? Well, strengths help energize us, right? We're at our best using our strengths. And the way I use it, for example, love of learning is such a big strength of mine. And so that's me honing into and learning different things. So it's not just like going on a zillion courses, but just like learning something new every day is exciting to me. Like I get a sense of energy from it. It could also be, through like leadership, and that might be like a big strength for you. And so how can you like lead your team in like interesting, novel ways? How can you connect with them better? Like, is there a way that you can do this and in your daily tasks, create your, almost like job craft your roles so that you're injecting your strengths, especially in parts of your job that you don't really like doing. It starts from, though, being aware of your strengths. And in dentistry, just we're not taught to do that. We're taught to look at our weaknesses and work on that. So, is there a way that you can do this? And that's through either using like quizzes. So you've got the like values and action quiz assessment. This is like a psychological assessment, and it comes up with like your top strengths that you're using. It's a brilliant one. Free resource as well. But you can also just reflect and think of your strengths, or you can ask your team members and Strength Spot, which we did when I came to do a workshop. But strengths work, joyful, exciting, will make you perform better and make you feel happier. Can we inject a bit more of, like I said, those positive emotions into our daily life?
Yeah, no, I think I agree. Like you said, you came in and did that strength work, and it changes the game for the team, right? Because I mean, half the time, like you said, you might not even know your strengths. You might not even know people think this about you. But as you said, all this comes down to training yourself, but bringing someone in as well to help you get trained, and also like getting resources, whether they're free or paid. A great resource that I'll mention on your behalf is it's like the mind flossing toolkit. If you're struggling with things that to come up with, like how can I reinvigorate the team? How can I reinvigorate myself? A simple deck of cards that gives you something to do right now. It's absolutely game changing and keeps things fresh. You don't have to do the same bit of flossing every single day. You can change it up. So absolutely great resource there. So definitely reach out via the Mind Ninja to grab that. So, and to that end, I guess we're at the end of the Quick Sips episode. I want to make people aware where they can find you and how they can get in touch. So over to you for that.
Brilliant. Yeah. So you can connect with me on Instagram. So I am mindninja.wellbeing. But you can also find me on my email. So it's mahrukh@mindninja.co.uk. And I can share all the links with you as well. I've got a website, mindninja.co.uk. So quite straightforward. If you search Mind Ninja, you'll probably find me quite quickly.
Yeah, well, it's a great name. So I think the SEO does very well on Google for that. So no, amazing. Well, thank you so much for joining Spilling the Teeth, this Quick Steps episode. Really great things people could take away. Super, super actionable. And yeah, would love to have you on the show again in the future. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much. That was brilliant.